Genshin Impact version 3.8 is up and running, and today I'm going to be taking a peek at Eula. In this video, I'm going to give you a quick guide to builder and see what team comps to go with. Real quick though, if you like this video or find it helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. This will help me a lot and I will greatly appreciate it. I also stream over on Twitch, link in the description below, so please give me a follow there as well. And without further ado, let's get into it. Going into Eula's talents, we have her normal attack, her skill, her burst, and then the 3 passives. My Eula here is at C0, so you'll be able to see what max scaling looks like at level 10 with each talent. So her normal attack has 5 swings to it. Note the 4th one has the biggest percentage. Later on in the video, I'll be going over how to really utilize her combos and to how to optimize her burst when you have that on deck. Next up, her skill, Ice-Tide Vortex, has 2 uses to it, press and hold. When you press it, she just simply swings her Claymore doing AoE damage, and she will gain a stack of Grim Heart, the duration of Grim Heart being 18 seconds. Grim Heart stacks twice, and for every stack that you have on Eula, her defense and resistance to interruptions is increased. Also worth noting is when you have a stack of Grim Heart, you'll see her little shawl or cape here begin to glow, and you'll also see swords above her head. 1 or 2 swords signifying how many stacks of Grim Heart you have. And then her hold ability consumes all stacks of Grim Heart, and it deals AoE cryo damage as well. For every stack consumed, her surrounding enemies have their physical and cryo resistance decreased, and the cooldown goes to 10 seconds. Her burst, Glacial Illumination, is going to be your big source of damage with Eula. It does a ton of damage. She will swing her sword, dealing cryo damage to all her enemies, and she will have a little sword following her, her light false sword, and that follows her for about 7 seconds. While the sword is active, Eula has increased resistance to interruptions, and during those 7 seconds, every normal attack and elemental skill will charge the light false sword with a max of 30. Once 7 seconds pass, the sword falls and explodes, dealing a lot of AoE damage. And the damage is based on how many stacks you got, so for more stacks you got, the bigger damage it will deal. If you swap your characters while the Lightfall Sword is active though, it will just immediately fall and explode. Roiling Rhyme is her passive, well, her first passive, and when 2 stacks of Grim Heart are consumed when using her skill, hold skill, a Shattered Lightfall Sword is created and immediately explodes, dealing 50% physical damage of what her burst would normally do. Next up is Wellspring of Warlust, and this procs when you use her burst. When it procs, it resets the cooldown of her skill and gives Eula 1 stack of Grim Heart. This is very crucial for her combos. And then of course her other passive just gives you a 10% chance to receive double the product when you craft talent material. So when prioritizing what talents to level up first, I would recommend honestly having an even spread. They are all very important to her kit. But if you want an order to it, it would be her burst first, then her normal attack, then her skill. So when it comes to building Eula, there are 2 artifact builds that I generally see on her. One of them is getting 2-piece Pale Flame and 2-piece Bloodstained Chivalry. Both 2-piece bonuses increase her physical damage by 25%. The other build that you'll see is going 4 Pale Flame. And a 4-piece Pale Flame will eventually out DPS the combination 2-piece Pale Flame, 2-piece Blood Chivalry. At 4-piece, when you hit an opponent with your elemental skill, your attack is increased by 9% for 7 seconds, and this can stack twice. Once you hit 2 stacks, the effects of the 2-piece are then doubled. As for main stats on your artifacts, for Sands, you have 2 options. You can go attack percent, which is what I'm doing for bigger numbers, or you can get energy recharge to try to build her burst back quicker. This is entirely up to preference. For Goblet, physical damage, seeing as Eula deals physical damage. Pretty self-explanatory there. And for the Circlet, crit rate, crit damage. This is going to be the typical DPS loadout. I would recommend trying to look for that crit damage Circlet if you can, and letting your substats build up on the crit rate. But this is going to be reliant on how your crit rate looks. I would recommend going about 50% crit rate depending on your team. There are ways to boost that crit rate without having to really dig deep into artifact building. Of course, Flower and Plume are set, so nothing you can really do about that. Just leave that. And for substats, crit rate, crit damage, of course. And then you're going to want to also look for energy recharge and attack percent. So here are some stats you want to look out for Eula. This is mine. It is nowhere near perfect, but it's a good introductory point for when you guys start going into what to look for. So start looking at the crit rate. That is really low. Domain farming, I usually have bad luck, but this is the best I can do after farming that damn domain over like hundreds of times. 40%. So in my case, I cater to you having to use 2 cryos and having Rosaria in my team to boost up the crit rate. Crit damage, I'm completely fine with. It's almost at 200%. Energy recharge looks alright. I would look for minimum 120, 130. So Eula has a good amount of weapons that she can use in this game in terms of claymores. First one we're looking at here is the Snow Tomb Star Silver. A nice easy 4-star weapon you can obtain. Great for free-to-play players as well, considering that you can just straight up craft this sword so you can easily max out on the refinements. Reason being it's so good is because of the physical damage buff that it gives Eula. Really complements her skill set. Not to mention the color scheme is just perfect. So this is a great sword for her to have, especially if you want that aesthetic look. Now something a little less aesthetically pleasing to some, my opinion looks fantastic. We got this beautiful fish here, the luxurious Sea Lord. If you were around for the event that lets you get this beautiful specimen here, it has great attack, and then its little ability here complements Eula pretty well too. Increases burst damage by 24%. And then if you hit them with your burst, you'll just do even more damage. If you also have the Akumara, that works fine with her as well if you were able to pull that during the banner. I do not have it. If you spent a little money on the game, in my opinion, the best 4-star weapon for her is the Serpent Spine. It does a good amount of damage, and then the crit rate is also really good, and then of course, the passive here just gives you more damage. Just be sure when you use the Serpent Spine that you're either A, good at dodging, or B, you have a good shielder so you don't lose out on the stacks that it provides here. As for some 5-star options here, Skyward Pride ain't too bad. This really complements her burst very well. Honestly, a lot of the good 5-star swords are fine with Eula. She can really work with them. The Red Hornstorm Thresher, if you got this during Ito's banner, is pretty damn good as well. This really complements the fact that when you use her skill, she'll gain defense out of it, and that'll increase her attack even more so. And the crit damage is also very nice to have, especially for her burst. Another good sword would be the Wolf's Gravestone. I currently don't have that, but that just stacks more attack onto Eula. Just overall dealing more damage. It's a beautiful weapon to have, just in general. And of course, if you're feeling lucky on the Gacha banner, Song of Broken Pines is probably, or arguably, I'm sorry, her best in slot. I mean, it's her signature weapon. Sword was meant for her. We got the physical damage bonus. We have increased attack and speed, attack speed, which are very great for her burst and just in general. So lastly, we'll just take a brief look at her constellations. Again, mine is at C0, so don't mind that. So Tidal Illusion is her C1. When you use your Grimheart stacks, which means your hold skill, Eula's physical damage is increased by 30% for 6 seconds, and depending on how many stacks you got, it'll increase the duration for another 6 seconds, maximum of 18 seconds. C2, when you use her hold skill, it just makes the duration, the cooldown, 4 seconds instead of 10 seconds. And then of course C3 just increases the level of her burst by 3. C4, her light false sword deals 25% more damage against opponents with less than 50%. Of course, C5 also increases her skill by 3. And then lastly, her C6. You'll start gaining stacks of her light false sword like crazy here. So it starts off with 5 stacks when you start her burst. And then normal attack skills and elemental bursts have a 50% chance to grant an additional stack. So you'll get a 50% chance to stack twice on a hit. So getting that 30 seems a lot more plausible when you have C6. So who pairs well with Eula in a team? I would recommend building Superconduct. That's where Eula excels at, being as Superconduct lowers the physical resistance of your enemies. So you're going to want Cryo, and you're going to want Electro. We got our Cryo with Eula, so we got to look for our Electro, in which I would recommend Raiden Shogun, one of the best Electro characters in the game. She's a very solid battery to build up those elemental particles. She can apply off-field Electro and on-field Electro very, very easily, and she can deal a lot of damage. If Eula's burst is on cooldown, you swap back to Shogun. You used her burst, generate those elemental particles very quickly, as well as dealing a ton of damage in the process. The two synergize very, very well. If you don't have Shogun, I highly, highly recommend rolling for her, as she pairs that great with Eula, and she's just, in general, one of the best units in the game. For an alternative choice, though, if you don't have Shogun, Fischl is great. He can also apply off-field Electro very easily with her skill. Once Oz disappears, you can come back to Fischl, use her burst, Oz is back for another few seconds, go back to Eula, apply those superconducts. Another good solid Electro choice would be Beidou. She can apply Electro pretty easily when she's on field if you've invested quite a bit into her, and she also provides a shield for Eula, or for your team. Third on the list, we're going to want a Cryo Battery, so we can get Eula's burst up very quickly. And a good choice for that would be Diona. We got the Cryo Battery here. She's a good healer and a good shielder. And she also, like I said, is Cryo, which will give you that elemental resonance of getting that 15% crit rate against opponents that are frozen or affected by Cryo. You could also build Sacrificial Bow on Diona to get those particles even quicker. Other good alternative choices for Cryo would be Rosaria. Rosaria can also help increase crit rate for Eula and is also a very good damage on field. Mika, being introduced into the game also right before Eula's rerun, is a fantastic 4-star unit. I unfortunately don't have him, but he's also able to buff up Eula's physical damage, which is a good alternative if you don't want to use Rosaria. Fourth slot is pretty flexible, depends on what your playstyle is. If you say don't have Diona or don't want to use Diona, Shlong Li here is a very good shielder. One of the best in the game. And you don't have to worry about elemental conflict, as Geo doesn't really react much with anything. Another good alternative is Bennett, one of the best 4-star units in the game. He is absolutely busted. Good healer, and he can buff up your attack. Just be careful though if you're running Bennett that he is at C5 max and not C6. C6 will overwrite a lot of the elemental combinations to Pyro. So now that Eula's back and Dendro has been introduced into the game, she unfortunately doesn't pair well with Dendro, seeing as Cryo and Dendro don't react. But that hasn't stopped some players from figuring out how to make it work. And one such team that I've come across is Eula, Shogun, Yellen or Xingqi, and Nahida. So the general idea for this team is to use Hyper Bloom as much as possible, using the character's off-field applications accordingly. And then you swap back to Eula and just hit things really, really hard while Hyper Bloom is going off in the background. Interesting team. It awkwardly works, but it's not something that you would want to do in, say, Spiral Abyss. It's more of a fun little gimmick. So we're going to look at her normal attack combos. So she has 5 normal swings, but that 5th swing animation's too long, so you'll generally want to cancel out of it using a dash or your skill. Depending on which combo you're doing, you can use your tap or your hold. Once her burst is ready to go, the optimal combo is to tap your skill, go into your burst, go into 4 normal attacks, canceling that last swing into a hold skill, and then normal attack until the burst falls. Overall, she is a very strong unit in the game, and I enjoy playing her quite a bit. Seeing a huge number when her burst falls is always satisfying to see. However, in current meta, she isn't really seen too much, as a lot of it really revolves around Dendro reactions. She is certainly the highest physical damage in the game, but right now Dendro reactions are just that dominant. If you're new into the game, however, she's very quick and easy to build, seeing as all of her materials for Ascension are right there in Mondstadt when you start the game. She'll be able to carry you through a lot of the story content until you get to the later areas such as Nazuma or Sumeru. But also, seeing as it's been well over a year and a half since Eula's last reruns, who knows when you'll see her again, so I will recommend rolling for her if you want to build a collection.